Based on a real story, a young woman uses her smarts to stay safe and get away from a person holding her at gunpoint. In her friend's house, Kara Robinson wakes up to the sound of birds. Soon, her friend Jess wakes up too. Later, Kara calls her mom, Deborah Johnson, to tell her about a party at the lake tonight. She also reminds her that she'll be visiting her dad earlier than usual this weekend, something Deborah doesn't like hearing. Jess asks Kara to water the plants while she gets ready, not noticing a black muscle car passing by. While Kara is outside, the same car stops, and Richard Ivanetz approaches her. He pretends to sell magazines before pulling out a gun. Terrified, he tells Kara to be quiet and get into a big storage bin in the back seat of his car. As they drive away, Kara fights off a panic attack. Jess is ready to leave but can't find Kara. She goes outside, finds the garden hose, and calls out for her friend worriedly. Meanwhile, the car stops in a deserted area, and Richard tells Kara that she'll be tied up and gagged, stressing that he has a gun. Kara agrees, and he goes to get the restraints. Kara looks for a way to escape, but decides to wait, fearing getting shot. Richard returns, binds her, closes the container, and continues the journey. Meanwhile, Jess calls Deborah's office, hoping Kara is there. Deborah denies it and becomes concerned. She calls Kara's boyfriend Ryan, who says she should be with Jess, but Deborah says Kara's not there. Worried, she calls the police before going to Jess's house. The abductor's car stops, and he brings the container into a house. He warns Kara to stay quiet, removes her restraints, and takes her to a bedroom, reminding her that he's always armed. He tells her to follow his orders and always ask for permission, warning of severe consequences if she breaks the rules. He questions her about her life and writes the answers in a notebook. Then, he orders her to lie on the bed and be quiet as he does something bad. Kara can only tell herself to follow the rules, wait, and stay alive. Meanwhile, Deborah calls her ex-husband Ron to make sure Kara isn't with him, which he confirms. Tearfully, she tells Ron that their daughter might have been abducted, and he hurries over. A police officer comes to Jess's house, and Deborah tells him that Kara has been missing for 2 hours. The officer thinks Kara ran away, but Deborah insists her daughter is responsible. The officer suggests waiting in case Kara calls. At Richard's house, Kara tries to gather info to escape. She talks to Richard, who used to be in the Navy. He promises she won't be hurt if she behaves and assures her he'll let her go. Kara considers running but thinks it's too risky. Later, Richard shows Kara his pets, saying he likes simple animals. He warns Kara not to report him or her reputation will suffer. Deborah, at home, is upset. Jess's neighbor saw a suspicious car before Kara disappeared, supporting her fears. Deborah organizes a search party. At Richard's, Kara asks to use the bathroom, hoping to escape. Richard appears with his gun, watching her closely. Kara asks permission to wash her hands. Richard orders her around and later asks her to help with dinner. While sweeping, Kara memorizes details around the house. Meanwhile, Sheriff Dale Stevens at the police station isn't taking Kara's disappearance seriously. He promises his best people will work on it, then asks Deborah to go home in case Kara calls. Richard watches the news at home. Kara is upset when her story isn't mentioned. Richard makes her believe nobody cares. He tells her to get in a storage bin, gags her, causing panic. Angry at the noise, he shows some compassion by removing the gag and not closing the container. Kara quietly cries, telling herself she must make it through. Later, Richard covers his pet's cages and says goodnight. He takes a big box under the cages, but when Kara sees, he quickly hides it. As he brushes his teeth, she thinks about closing the door and escaping through the window. But she knows she'll get caught. Before sleep, Richard chains Kara to the bed, saying he's excited for tomorrow. In the morning, Kara wakes to Richard's snores, deciding it's her chance. She unchains herself, tiptoes out, and bolts out the front door. She flags down a car with 2 men, explaining she was abducted. They take her to a police station. She reports her abduction to Lieutenant Aaron Rowland, who calls for another inspector and takes her statement. Sergeant Bonnie Jennings interviews Kara's rescuers, but they can't remember the apartment. Kara recounts her escape, and Bonnie hands Deborah the missing persons report. Deborah gets a call from Erin, learning her daughter is found. Kara talks to her mum, and Bonnie asks if Kara can identify the apartment. Erin convinces her to try. At the apartment complex, units look the same. They describe Kara's attacker to a maintenance man. Kara adds details, and he figures it's apartment 301. Bonnie checks the unit, while Erin takes Kara back, praising her memory. Deborah reunites with Kara at the police station. At Unit 301, Bonnie, Erin, and Sheriff Jim Price find no one. Kara and her mom are at a hospital when Bonnie shows pictures. Kara identifies Richard, confirmed to lease apartment 301, but he's already escaped. Bonnie assures them they'll catch him soon. She asks Kara for more info to find Richard. Kara shares what she knows, pointing to the box under the bird cages. Bonnie says Kara needs a physical exam for evidence. At the crime scene, Erin finds no car registration for Richard's black muscle car. In the box, they find evidence of Richard's past crimes and a notebook. Jim tells officers to check the cases in the clippings, and Erin looks into the notebook. Jim tells Dale that the clippings are about cold cases of Sophia Sylvia and the Liska sisters, other victims. Richard kept victims for days before drowning them. The notebook had potential targets, but Kara wasn't on it. Jim thinks Richard had to take someone else. Bonnie says Richard's family will cooperate. After her exam, Kara reunites with Jess, Ryan, and Ron. She tells Jess it wasn't her fault. People whisper about Kara, who wants to go home. Bonnie and Jim search Richard's mother's house and find his black car. Bonnie visits the Johnsons, explaining the officers are there for safety. Kara doesn't like it but accepts. She rests, jokingly hoping Richard gets caught while she's asleep. Bonnie says it will happen soon. Next morning, Kara tells her mom she'll visit Ryan. Deborah objects, saying she shouldn't leave until Richard is caught. Kara insists she won't let tragedy change her life. They argue until Jess arrives. Kara invites her to her room, acting normal. Jess is unsure, but Kara encourages her to ask anything. Jess just wants to make sure Kara is okay. Kara reassures her and tells Jess to ask anything she wants. Jess hesitates and asks Kara to explain what happened. Meanwhile, Erin talks to Richard's wife, Ashley, at the station. Ashley says she was away for the weekend and insists Richard wouldn't do such things. She claims to know nothing about where he is. Richard's sister, Stephanie, arrives, greeting their mom, Maggie. Ashley gets upset seeing Stephanie. Stephanie reveals Richard used Ashley's car with a swapped license plate and might contact them to meet his wife. She thinks this isn't his first time abducting women. Stephanie admits Richard contacted her, apologizing yesterday. Erin gives Jim info about the motel where Richard is staying. Jim thinks Richard is still there, so Bonnie goes to the motel. Kara sees Jess off and asks if they'll still watch Ryan's baseball game later. Jess is surprised but says yes. Dale arrives and asks how Kara is. He calls her a victim and says she should stay home until they catch Richard. Kara says the police should try harder to catch him, as they did nothing when she was abducted. Dale reveals Richard planned to harm Kara, as he likely did with 3 other women. Kara, thinking Richard would release her, is shocked. Dale says luck had nothing to do with her escape. Bonnie says Richard left the motel, but left Kara's shirt. Erin thinks a family member warned him, but Jim believes Richard is busy escaping. He tells Erin the evidence matches other cases. Erin is amazed that Kara might solve cold cases. At Kara's home, Jim introduces himself as the sheriff and says Kara is strong enough to defend herself, surprising her. He offers to answer any questions, so Kara asks if Richard is responsible for what happened to Sylvia and the Liss sisters. Jim says they're waiting for evidence, but the box Kara pointed to suggests so. Kara asks if Richard would have harmed her, and Jim admits they'll never know because she didn't give him the chance. Kara is surprised by this realization. Jim thanks her, calling her a survivor, not a victim. Leaving Kara's house, he gets a call from Erin, who says Richard used his cell phone in Jacksonville, Florida, heading to his other sister in Bradenton. Jim advises Erin to inform the police there. Bonnie reports the Ivanets family has no more info. They reach Richard's sister in Bradenton, Pamela, who says he called her to meet outside his favorite restaurant. Bonnie contacts Bradenton Police Department, warning Richard may be coming. At the Johnson residence, Kara walks to Jess's car while Deborah pleads for her not to leave. Kara is determined to put her abduction behind and get her life back. Deborah insists she needs time to recover, but Kara refuses to let what happened take her life away. She apologizes to her mom and leaves with Jess. At the baseball game, Kara wishes Ryan luck. Elsewhere, Bradenton officers spot Richard, who flees as one officer chases on foot. The other radios their location before joining by car. They corner Richard, and as Ryan hits a home run, Richard takes his own life. The next day, Kara wakes up uneasy but smiles as she starts her day. Her mom makes pancakes, unusual for her. Deborah tells her Richard passed away, and officers are coming. Kara is furious no one told her immediately, but Deborah didn't want to ruin their celebration about the baseball game. Kara goes off by herself. Soon, Jim comes and finds Kara sitting outside. He sits next to her and thinks her anger goes deeper. Kara lets out her built-up anger towards Richard, saying her wish for justice kept her going after the abduction. She wanted to tell Richard that taking her was a big mistake. Kara realizes there's no trial, so she doesn't have to share the painful details of her abduction, sparing her loved ones. Jim admires that she still thinks about protecting them and calls her a hero. Inside, Bonnie tells Deborah to give Kara time to deal with her feelings. Kara comes in, saying she wants her freedom back and won't let what happened control her. Deborah apologizes for being controlling and not knowing what to do. Kara tells her the tragedy doesn't change who she is. She's a survivor.
Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.